So in this lesson, we're going to learn about the basic measures of central tendency, and we're going to be looking specifically at mean, median, and mode. And so our objective is to be able to use these descriptive data measurements to inform us about real world data. And so here's a little bit of data that we're confronted with. So especially right now, we're inundated with this information about coronavirus, and we get all kinds of statistics that we're seeing. And, being here in South Korea, we see things like, we're flattening the curve, but then we see in the United States that they're not flattening the curve. We get a lot of data about what's happening, with students in the United States, and we see things about how kids in the United States are in poverty, but then we see how things affect us, here and how we live. But then we see differences between how we, live and what our parents can afford versus what other people can afford. And we wonder about what really makes those differences and why some people have things that we don't. Okay, so what makes all those differences, and what do all of these numbers mean to us, and where do they come from? And how do we actually go ahead and really understand them? And so that's where making sure we understand data. And because when people say, numbers don't lie, well, yeah, they kind of can lie. And it's not that the numbers don't lie, but people can use them in different ways to deceive us. And so that's what we have to make sure is that we understand what people are talking about so that we can make better decisions. Okay, so what are the measures of central tendency? So when we're given a set of finite data, finite means that we can count it. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things in this data set. 1 million people, 7.5 billion people in the world. We're talking about the mean, median, and mode. Things that measure the middle. Things that we're talking about the middle. What's the middle? Talking about what's typical of that group. That's what central tendency is. So the first one that we're going to look at is the mean. Okay, so you probably did this in elementary school, so this should just be a review. The mean isn't about being angry. It's not an emotion. It's just finding that what we call the average. So mean is the fancy word for average. And to find the average, you're first determining the sum of the data set, and then you're dividing the sum by n. Now, when you get really sophisticated, you learn that instead of using that word, they use this in college statistics to use for mean. That is the Greek letter for sigma, and so that's what we used for sum when we get to college. So instead of using mean, they say, what's the sigma? So anyway, now you know college math too. Okay, so if we're going to calculate the mean of this data set, the first thing we're going to do is find the sum of the data. So you would do this with a calculator. I would advise you always use a calculator when you're doing statistics. So you would go ahead and you would, in your calculator, add 18 plus 15 plus 17 plus 24. Oops, sorry. And you should get 93. Because you have a calculator, it's never a bad idea to do it twice. And the reason is because the most often mistaken thing is people put their stuff in their calculator wrong. So do it twice, make sure you get the same thing both times, and double check to make sure you got 93 with me. Okay, so if you got 93 also, let's do the next step. So you're going to take your sum and you divide it by n. Well, what is n? N is how many numbers are in your data set. So in this case, n would be 5 because there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 numbers in our data set. So we're going to take 93 and we're going to divide it by 5, and that's going to give us exactly 18 and 6/10. So that means our mean is going to be 18 and 6/10. And if you want to know a little bit more college math, but you don't really have to know this. In college, we call this X bar. So I would say the mean is, oh, I'm sorry, this is the sum, and X bar is the mean. I did say that wrong. There you go. So X bar is the mean, and it's 18.6. Ah. Well, okay. Anyway. Okay, so now we're going to find the median. So the median, in real life, the median is sometimes a word used for the middle of a road. It's like kind of like that concrete barrier that kind of separates the two sides of like a 4-lane road, so people don't jump over to the other side and hit cars going the opposite directions. That's like the median. But what it really means is it's the middle. Okay, so it's the middle or exact center of an ordered set. And that's really important. It has to be in order. To determine the median, you must order the set from least to greatest. You actually could do it from greatest to least. It's just as a matter, it just needs to be in order. To find the middle number of an odd set, or the numbers of an even set. Okay, so it doesn't need to be odd. It could be an even set. There can only be one median. So an even number set requires you to do an additional step, which is find the average of the two numbers in the middle. Okay, so let's look at this one. We're going to count first. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 numbers. So that means this is an even set, which means we have two things in the middle. And since we have two things in the middle, we're going to have to do that extra step. Okay, so first thing is, let's write them in order. So the least number is going to be 15, then 17. So I'm just going to kind of check them off as I go. Then 18, then 19, then 20, and then 24. So when I go ahead and I'm trying to find the middle numbers, I tend to do it like this. I go ahead and I say, okay, well, 15 is the lowest and 24 is the highest, so they cannot be in the middle. So then I match the next lowest and the next highest together because they can't be in the middle. So that leaves me the two numbers in the middle, 18 and 19. So if I have 6 things, then that means the third and the fourth ones have to be in the middle. Now, if I was in class, I would have you do your fingers, and I would have you, kind of poke down your fingers until you got to the middle ones. Okay, so 18 and 19 are in the middle. So I found the middle numbers, and now I'm going, there are 2 middle numbers, I'm going to average them. So how do we average? To average, we add, and we divide by how many they are. So if there's 2 in the middle, I'm going to add them up and divide by 2. So 18 and 19 is 37, and 37 divided by 2 would be 18 and a half. So my median would be 18 and a half. Okay, and right now for this part of the lesson, we're not really too worried about how we're using this information. We're just worried about how we're calculating it. Okay, so now let's look at finding the mode. So the mode sometimes is very useful, but sometimes statisticians feel that it could be something that's very not useful at all. Okay, so finding the mode. So the mode I always use mode, most, just like median, middle, median, middle, mode, most, mean, average. And so those are my words that I kind of clue in to kind of remember what my measures of central tendency, fancy words versus what I kind of have to think of what they do for each one. Okay, so it's the value that occurs the most often, but there could be more than one. So sometimes we may have a set of data that has more than one mode. It could have two modes, it could have three modes. Sometimes it could have several modes, especially if we have a very large set of data. So, like, for example, if I was looking at home sales in a state, and I had a list of all of the houses that sold and the prices they sold for. Well, there could be, thousands of homes that sold in a year in a state, and there could be the same price that was given for 100 homes, and there could have been, those houses could have sold, like many of those houses could have sold for different prices, and all been very close to each other. So there could be multiple modes, and it's not very useful for me when the modes are all different, but they only really differed by a few dollars each. So what does that tell me about that information? It tells me that that mode isn't very useful at that part, but I just have to look at my statistic a little bit differently. Okay, so going ahead and finding the mode is pretty easy, and it does help if you go ahead and put it in order. So let's go ahead and do that. So I have 0 and a 0, and then I have a 1. So let me cross those out so I don't forget. Next number would be 2, 2, 2, 2. Then I have a 3 and a 3. Then I have a 5 and a 5. And then I have a 9 and a 9. Okay, so if I was going to say how often each number is coming, I have 0 appeared twice, 1 appeared once, 2 appeared 3 times, twice, twice, twice. So even though I'm getting all the 0, 3, 5, and 9 are all appearing twice, the 2 appeared more often than any other number. So this is unimodal, and 2 is definitely going to be the mode. So 2's appearing more often. Okay, if 2 had only appeared twice, then I would have to say 0, 2, 3, 5, and 9 were the modes. But at that point, my data really and truly wouldn't have a meaningful mode. Okay, and that's it. Thank you.